Hello, my name is Reinhild Niebuhr. I'm the founder of the Young Africa Vision. Welcome to this episode of Young Africa Today. In today's episode, I'm going to introduce you to the third of the foundational instruments that I created in order to enable young people in Africa to transform this continent from a place of unnecessary desperation to a space of global inspiration. The objective of Young Africa Investments is to help entrepreneurs in Africa to own businesses, especially franchise-based businesses. If there's one thing that I have learned is that we should never try to reinvent the wheel. Starting a business from scratch is really difficult and really expensive. And so it makes a lot more sense to replicate models that have been proven internationally already and also identify businesses that work well in Africa and help to develop those into franchises. We don't just have to look at business franchises, we can also look at social franchises and copy good practices and replicate them all across the continent. Now, our strategic investment focus areas are really aligned to the strategic focus area of the Young Africa Vision in general. And so the idea is really to build businesses. Firstly, the first four focus areas are selected because they specifically are suited to growing local-based jobs. And those are Young Africa Community, Young Africa Health, Young Africa Culture, and Young Africa Innovation. The other two strategic focus areas are Young Africa Innovation and Young Africa Ecology. These ones are more focusing on systems, on developing systems or developing businesses that can serve the continent as a whole or even be international. Businesses such as software systems and methodologies and products and that are innovative and that can be adapted across the globe. Now, in order to start these businesses, one of the other things that I realized, traveling all over Africa, is that there is a terrible lack of infrastructure, of economic infrastructure. And so I believe that it's really important that we must create safe spaces for businesses to do business in. Our businesses in Africa are quite vulnerable to crime, and we need to create safe spaces where our businesses can work together and where we have infrastructure, where shared infrastructure which can help to bring the costs of security down. So I came up with two basic concepts. The one is called Young Africa Square and the other one is called Young Africa City. These are basic infrastructure systems that we can replicate all over Africa. And the one is linked to the Young Africa School program and the other one is linked to the Young Africa Academy for Young Africa Satellite Campus program. So generally, Young Africa Academy for Young Africa Satellite Campuses are really using existing infrastructure. So they don't need any new buildings. They're trying to optimally utilize existing buildings that churches already have, that non-profit organizations already have. Young Africa School is working around school buildings that already exist. However, if we then expand the activities and if we set up infrastructure attached to a school or infrastructure attached to a campus or design a completely new Young Africa City infrastructure which includes an Academy for Young Africa campus, then we can build really innovative, great sustainable green multi-purpose or mixed-use developments all across Africa where our young people can live, learn, work, earn, shop and play. And this is something that I believe can really help drive infrastructure development and in a private way without burdening the state and expecting the states in Africa to have all the investment and all the answers. Let us who are entrepreneurial, let us who are private sector entrepreneurs and to understand how money works and how to create developments, let us go and take the lead and be the ones that shape the future of this continent, in partnership, of course, always with the governments of the day. So Now, I also spent a lot of time researching how does a city start. And it was quite funny. I mean, I just randomly started looking on the internet, and then I started thinking about the old Romans, the Roman Empire that was very effective in building infrastructure, fascinating infrastructure, aqueducts and roads that really enabled trade. And I started doing a little bit of research, just using Google, is no academic research whatsoever, and looking at what was the approach. And it was fascinating to find that generally the senators that were living in Rome were expected to take the lead in building cities in any new area that the Romans had taken over. Now, Young Africa is certainly not an empire building program. It's purely an enabling program to help young people in Africa fulfill the potential and live and build beautiful lives. But it's always interesting to see what others have done that have gone before us. And one of the things that I found is that generally the approach that Roman city builders took is that you needed 300 highly qualified people that needed to settle a city. And so I started doing some calculations and modeling this, and I came to the conclusion that we need 3 anchor businesses in order to build the foundation of a city. And for me, a city is something, is generally about 10,000 adults and 20,000 children. So it's around 30,000 inhabitants. And so what we need to do is we need to build 3 anchor businesses. One one which is educational, which generally would be a residential satellite campus of the Academy for Young Africa, where we can focus on vocational training and business training and all kinds of other training, which is not purely online, but which requires some practical expression under the guidance of skills facilitators, or people that train you to do something physically, using equipment, using machinery, using things that you can't really do online as easily. Of course, we have fantastic new 3D virtual reality technology that can help with that kind of training as well, and one most definitely will want to make use of that. But anyway, the thinking is really just to build educational institutions that are residential campus facilities, and that these become then one of the anchor businesses which can create around 300 jobs of people that are higher skilled. The second kind of business is any kind of health facility, and really I'll go into the health strategy in a future episode, as I will also go, as I have gone into the Academy for Young Africa in the previous episode, but I will also focus on unpacking the education strategy in more detail in a future episode. But anyway, in terms of the health kind of business, we can really build beautiful health facilities all across Africa that can, again, employ about 300 people that are higher skilled. And in that way, we can create opportunities for people who have already left their original hometown to come back, because there may be young people who went to the city to look for work or to get training or whatever, and now that they're married and they have children, and they would like the children to grow up in an environment where they grew up, and which feels more like home to them. And so in that way we can bring a lot of people back home. Similarly, we can also thirdly build the third anchor business, which is always around food production. It's all or agricultural production. So wherever there are people, there's food. And the model that I really love is the model that combines energy with the food. I won't go into that now, but I will unpack it further when I look at the Young Africa ecology strategy. But anyway, so the intention is that you really set up three anchor businesses wherever you want to plant a city. We have to plant cities. I looked at South Africa just as a starting point, and I realized that we need another 15 cities of about 1 million people. And yes, my little models are really looking at about 30,000 people around one particular development with a particular thing, but one can replicate that model practically endlessly. You can have similar models next to one another until there's about 1 million people living in an area, because then you can start looking at attracting all kinds of other industries and all kinds of secondary industries and all kinds of activities and other people that have training offerings, all kinds of exciting things you can bring into an environment where there's about 1 million people living. But I thought it's important to take it down to where do you start? Where do you start? And I believe we can start building Young Africa cities that focus on around 30,000 people, of which about a third are adults. And so these businesses are going to create jobs, what I call a decent job. A decent job is a job that earns, where the person earns at least $1,000 a month. Of course, people in leading positions, management positions, higher skilled positions, specialist positions would be earning a lot more than that. But the lowest paid skilled worker in one of these enterprises should not earn less than $1,000 a month. Why is that so important? Because that provides the type of economic impetus so that the spouse of this person can actually start looking at owning a smaller service-oriented businesses or a smaller retail business that can serve the local community. And that is where the franchise model becomes so interesting. The franchise model is also very interesting from the point of view of people over 50. I really think that it would make enormous sense if you are over 50 to leave your current job, if you are employed in the city, and to move back home to where you originated from, and to use your provident, part of your provident savings to buy a franchise-based business. Because in that way, you can create a business that's going to build wealth for you into the future without having to worry that your pension provident savings are going to run out, because you're investing it in something live, a business that can continue serving the community around you. And at the same time, you can contribute to job creation. Now, the jobs that you are going to create in a franchise are probably not going to be jobs for very skilled people. So those jobs are, for me, entry-level jobs that young people would do for like 2 or 3 years until they have completed their studies and their training and improved their studies, maybe to 5 years. But then they really should move on and open their own business, or open their own franchise, or have a better paid job somewhere else. So these entry-level positions would be earning about $500 a month. That is about 8,000 rand in South Africa, while the $1,000 jobs are around 15 to 16,000 rand. So these are really calculations that I have worked on, looking at the current living expenses and looking at modern conveniences, looking at requirements in terms of being able to afford a bachelor, or one bedroom apartment, and being able to pay that off so that you can start, instead of paying rent, you can start building some wealth through owning your own property. And in this, if you are a young couple that's living together with one child, you can still share a bachelor flat, you can still share a one-bedroom apartment, and you can still start buying one and paying it off, so that by the time you're ready to move on, you can sell it to the next young person, and you are ready to look for a 2 or 3 bedroom apartment or house, or whatever suits your fancy. So that is really a discussion around a decent job. What is a decent job? And that is looking at not just at Africa. That is actually, I spent some time with my husband in Europe and in America in 2018, and at the time the figure was more or less the same. It would be nice to make it $1,200, which is more in the region of about 18,000 rand. But I believe that we are all living in a very, in a time where we all have to be very frugal, and we all have to really be wise of how we use our money, and everybody has to give up behavior that is consumer driven and rather focus on a conserver driven culture. So I think $1,000 you can live with. Now, as I explained, I spoke about our key investment programs. We have the Young Africa School, we have the Academy for Young Africa, we have the Young Africa Square, which is like a mini mall development, and we have the Young Africa city, which is a major mixed-use development. So let me just introduce you to the Young Africa School model together with Young Africa Square model. Now, this is something that I really thought about in terms of working and looking at so many, at one of the obstacles to investment that we have in Africa is the land tenure insecurity, the insecurity of land tenure, and also the fact that there's a model of tribally owned land where the chief owns the land, and there's no individual land ownership. Now this becomes very difficult for somebody who wants to invest in infrastructure, because you don't seem to have a guarantee on the lease or on the land. I believe that this is where we can be highly innovative, and we can actually work with new building technology that is temporary, which means if there's an argument, or if there is unhappiness and there's a dissent with the entity that's responsible for the land, one can remove the infrastructure again. I think this is really something that one can do. Hopefully it will never be necessary, because one builds good relations and everybody is working in good faith with one another. But I started looking, for instance, just at school grounds in South Africa, and generally the government owns quite a lot of land around the schools, and much of this land is undeveloped. It's just basically bare land. There's no sport facilities. Hopefully in future there will be, but for now, why not use some of that land to start setting up some economic infrastructure that sort of piggybacks on the security that's already provided and offered by the school system, and at the same time it becomes a convenient place, because you have an existing audience and all the learners that come there, an existing target market, and at the same time it also becomes more convenient for parents who are going to pick up their children to make use of the shops and the facilities and the services that you offer around this. So if you let's have a look at how this would work. So I've prepared a slide which is really around the Young Africa Square model. What you see here is like a green square that's an area of about roughly 1,000 square meters. But inside that you will have an area that's about 108 square meters, and that you would start with, and you would fence this area in, and you would create security for it, and it would be generally on the border of a school ground. so that part of the activities can be accessible to children during the breaks or in the afternoons, and part of the activities would be accessible to passers-by from the community, so that you still maintain the integrity and security of the school ground, and you don't interfere with that. And so there are 3 core franchises models that I've developed. The first one is a Young Africa Community Liaison and Information Center. That's Young Africa Click, and that creates one little job. It's a mini franchise, and but of course, if it's going to be open later hours, then you can have different young people running the Click Center for different shifts, working different shifts. But the Click Center is almost like a central pay point which manages the payments, and which also sells things like data, Wi-Fi, wireless data, and all kinds of other services, electricity cards, and which also houses an ATM, so that people can draw cash in areas where cash is still the main currency used. So next to it is a Young Africa Cafe. Now this can be any kind of food franchise. It's really just saying that we might as well just have food franchises that offer healthy, portable food to people who are working and to coming home late and who want to buy something healthy. And this would be really very much, the Young Africa Cafe model is very much based on soups and stews and salads and sandwiches. So it's all very healthy, fresh food. And of course it will also offer beverages, non-alcoholic beverages, both hot and cold. And this will just be a major improvement of access to healthy food that is prepared and ready for people who are in a hurry. And then we have, and of course for lunches for the school children, if they are able to buy a lunch. Now, the third one is really a very interesting private primary healthcare point. Now, I included this private primary healthcare point as part of the first three mini franchises on a school ground. Why? Because all across Africa, government health services are struggling and are overburdened. And there's so much space for the private sector to become involved here, especially with new technology, in terms of offering screening, to empower people to understand their own health situation, to empower people to understand what they need to do, to understand nutrition, to understand, are they at risk for high blood pressure, are they at risk for sugar diabetes. These are things that can save incredible numbers of lives. They're lifestyle diseases that very often have to do with the fact that people just don't know better. And a community healthcare worker can really provide helpful information to members in the community who want to take control of their health and who want to just basically have access to a referral system. The exciting thing is that we now also have telemedicine possibilities where we can have a consultation with a qualified medical practitioner who sits thousands of kilometers away and who can interview the patient and who can instruct the private primary healthcare worker to do certain things in terms of getting physical evidence, such as the rapid tests for checking, diagnostic information, and having one of these private primary healthcare points in every smallish village, so that it can serve about 1,000 people, is really going to improve the health status, I believe, of people in Africa, and to be so empowering to people in Africa. So those are the three basic franchises that I think one can start at every single school. In addition to that, under the Young Africa School program, which I will unpack at a future episode, there's a whole range of extramural activities that students of the Leadership and Entrepreneurship program can offer to learners that attend the school. And these are not free services, these are not funded services, these are paid for services. But I have got enough experience working with a school model where we used exactly that model, where parents were willing to make a small financial contribution depending on the level of income in that area, and that could sustain the position of a couple of young people who are able to offer soccer coaching, able to offer choir practice, able to offer arts classes, able to offer maths tuition, able to offer English extra classes, all kinds of things to help support public schools in order to make sure that the quality of learning and support that the learners receive is upgraded. So the Young Africa School program, in partnership with the Young Africa Square program, is really a core opportunity for investing in our children and in our youth, and starting to build economic infrastructure in remote communities that at the moment are completely underserved. And this facility then, if we go to the next slide, this facility can then grow. And it can grow, and it can include, for instance, on about 1,000 square meters, it can include 14 different mini franchises. So now these can create at least 14 jobs, but generally there's more than one person working in any of these businesses, because also because of the hours in terms of shifts, because you want to keep this facility open from 7 to 7 at least, sometimes even 24 hours, because you want a place where people can go and be safe, no matter what their life situation. So you want a place where, for instance, which is where people can access the internet. You want a place where people can buy electricity. You want a place where people can buy food. You want a place where people can get computer training. You want a place where people can get other forms of training. You know, as a mini satellite campus of the Academy for Young Africa. You want a place where people can go to if they have to receive counseling or if they have been treated badly, and you want a point which is going to create a community safety system. And this is another system. It's one of the franchise-based businesses, is to create community safety systems inside, you know, across villages across Africa, in order to create safe spaces for people to live, work, and learn, and for children to play. And we don't have, you know, I always think of this book by a very famous Nigerian author, brilliant author, Chinua Achebe, called Things Fall Apart. It's probably the most fatalistic book I've ever read in my whole life, and I don't agree with the outcome of the book at all. I always feel like writing a counter book to that book that has the title Things Fall Apart If We Let Them. If we let them. So to just give up because you can't cope with the situation is never an answer for a human being. A human being that has faith in God, a human being that can ask for wisdom from the Holy Spirit, a human being that can accept forgiveness and that can forgive other people through Jesus Christ, always has an answer of how to turn things around. We can turn things around without giving up beautiful African cultural practices. All we have to do is reconsider which cultural practices serve us, are going to serve us in future, and which, you know, have had their time. It's quite a normal process. Culture is dynamic. We're not stuck in culture. Our culture develops with us, and we develop our culture. And so we don't have to, just because they're not, you know, because now there's modernization. Modernization, I'm not talking about westernization, I'm talking about modernization. This modernization is simply human beings understanding how to do things that make, you know, that make life easier, and that can actually improve the quality of life. And this can still be respectful of traditional cultural perspectives and values. It doesn't have to be exclusive of that. So really, one of the things that I believe we can do, and we have to do, is to create a safe Africa. If we want to attract investment into Africa, and if we want to protect the investment of the money and the capital that we generate here in Africa, we need to create a safe Africa. And we can do that. We can absolutely do that. There's a concept of defensible neighborhoods, which a very good friend of my husband, who was also an architect, Abraham Taser, always likes to talk about defensible neighborhoods. We must develop defensible neighborhoods where neighbors keep an eye out for their fellow neighbors, so that there's no space where a criminal can feel comfortable and can hide. We need to build a system where families take responsibility for their children, so that the children do not become criminals. We need to build a system where a family is held accountable for what the children do, and in that way we ensure that households take accountability for what members of the household do, so that we just help everybody to stay on the straight and narrow and not to fall off into the depths of crime, but to actually start applying their brilliant brain on how to develop the community, how to develop businesses in the community. So I've just given you really a very small overview. A very small overview. There are so many exciting things happening. I mean, one of the things, for instance, that I've just come to the conclusion, actually my husband, who was an architect, and I came to this conclusion, is that if we're ever going to develop something in a rural area again, we are not going to build from scratch. We are going to work with highly competent partners that have developed modular building methodologies, where most of the building is prefabricated off-site and simply delivered and erected on-site, so that you don't have the challenges of weather delaying. You don't have You don't have the challenges of material being stolen because you basically don't have any bricks or sand lying around that someone else can pick up and take. You work with highly competent practitioners who already know how to do this, and there are many of them around that can build something from scratch in a very short time all across Africa, regardless of the site. And one of the very innovative companies that we came across is a company in Pretoria called House Zero. And I'm just showing one image here of a really beautifully designed concept. They've got a very, very cleverly designed concept that is off-grid, that doesn't require a connection to the electricity, that generates its own electricity, and also is really built on grey water, using grey water systems to recycle water already. It's an absolutely beautiful concept, and these are the kinds of companies that Young Africa wants to partner with. Of course, we will also be partnering with engineering firms and building contractors all across the continent in order to roll out prepare the sites. Let's use local labor to prepare the sites, and let's bring in top technology to erect buildings that make economic and environmental sense, and that are easy to maintain, and that can really provide an excellent quality of life to the young people, the young families that are going to live in these buildings. 200 million. I mean, 200 million, if you divide them by 2, guys and girls, got 100 million young families that need accommodation to raise their children in. So over the next 30 years. So really, let us provide infrastructure so that these young people don't have to try and build a house from scratch, wasting an incredible amount of time and resources doing so. Let us introduce innovative building systems and building technology that has been proven, that is environmentally friendly, that is focusing on conserving energy and water, that is low maintenance, that is safe, that makes use of our beautiful sun for energy. Let us just be clever, let us just be wise and learn from others, and not try to reinvent the wheel the whole time with building little brick houses that are extremely energy inefficient. Another picture I want to share is just a bit of a fantasy picture. This is not necessarily one of the Young Africa city developments that we want to develop, but it's basically just saying that Africa needs new cities, and we have the opportunity to learn and introduce the most top technology. We can build the most amazing cities. The Middle Eastern countries have really set an example in this regard, in terms of coming up with these phantasmal cities that people love living in, and buildings that people enjoy living in. Let's build developments like these. Young Africa City is basically a mixed-use development where people can live, learn, work and shop and play, and where children are safe, and where they can get access to private schools, and where the parents are able to contribute to that because they have decent jobs. Let us no longer sit and wait for our governments to take the lead. Let us who are entrepreneurial and who are visionary partner and take hands and do things that can really improve the quality of life for everybody on the continent of Africa. Young Africa Investments is an instrument that has been designed to serve as a catalyst of such development in partnership with anybody who wants to work with us. Of course, we are looking for investors, and in fact, in 2018, my husband and I, my husband's name was Nico den Oudsten. He was quite an amazing guy. He passed away in 2019, and that sort of put me on a back foot and stopped the process that we had started working on in 2018, where we started visiting, spending time in Washington DC, in America, and in Germany, and in the Netherlands, and in Switzerland, talking to prospective investors and talking to prospective franchisor partners. There is so much opportunity out there, and we really have developed some very interesting models for partnership. And so I'm hoping to be able to focus most of my attention on pursuing that work as I move forward into the future. And so if you are somebody who's interested in investing in Young Africa Investments, really it's a no-brainer. Building infrastructure and building businesses for where youth in Africa can fulfill their potential and where they can build beautiful lives. It's the future. So please visit our website, youngafrica.info/investments, and at the bottom of the website page you will find a form which will send an email to our email address, which is investments@youngafrica.info. Investments@youngafrica.net. Investments@youngafrica.net. There are a lot of Young Africa domain names and a lot of Young Africa instruments, but they all form part of one beautiful picture of realizing the vision of a young Africa. Thank you for watching this episode. I hope you enjoyed some of the ideas, and if you are the principal of a school in Africa, please reach out. We want to set up a Young Africa school model and a Young Africa Square model in partnership with your school. If you are somebody who is a councillor or a mayor of a city in Africa, please contact me. I have a beautiful model which is fully funded by an institutional investor of creating a food and energy business that can create about 500 jobs in your community within a very short period of time. These opportunities exist. I have had an amazing time collecting them. Now it's time to work together and communicate these opportunities and find partners who are the first to take the step of building the infrastructure and the businesses that Young Africa needs. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next episode